Welcome to the Story a Day podcast. This is Julie Duffy, encouraging you to be a writer today, not someday. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Julie here from the Story a Day podcast. And Story a Day September is right around the corner. And I want to talk about how we're preparing for that. I want you to think for a moment about what it feels like on a day when you sit down and you want to write and it's just not coming. Or maybe you plan to write later in the day and the day goes on and on, you get tired and it gets to the end of the day and you think, well, maybe I'll write tomorrow. So just sit with that for a minute. Think about how that feels. Think about what's going on in your body when that happens. And now, I want you to take a moment and think about how it feels on a day when you get up and you get to your writing and it's just flowing and you finish a piece and you get that kick from finishing a story and all is right with the world. Right? It doesn't really matter what else is going on while you're writing, and in that moment when you finish the piece, you just know you've got this and you're good at something, right? And it feels fantastic. And I want you to sit with that for a minute and think about how that feels. There is so much to do in writing. There's stuff to worry about. Is your grammar correct? Are you telling the right kind of story? Is your character have an arc? So much stuff going on that when our writing isn't going well, I think we have a tendency to think that there's a technical problem. If you just took one more class, if you just read one more article, you could figure out that problem with your dialogue that is causing all the hang-ups and stopping you from writing. Unfortunately, I have over the years come to the conclusion that that's not that at all. Those kind of problems are the kinds of problems that will crop up while you're writing something. And if they crop up while you're writing something, you will quickly find a solution. You'll talk to someone, you'll ask someone for help, or you will find the right article and you'll be looking out, your antenna will be up and you'll be looking out for it and you'll find the answer and then you'll just keep going. We can tell ourselves that we're not writing because we're not good enough or because we don't know how to do something. But that's not really what's stopping us. So go back to the exercise where I asked you to think about how you feel when the writing's going well. You're in a state of inspiration, excitement, flow, and that's what we're chasing when we're writing. So I watched an interesting video this week. It was all about this idea of state. It's by a guy called Eric Plattenberg, and I'll provide a link in the notes to his TED Talk, because he interviewed, I'm going to spoil it for you, but he interviewed a bunch of high-performing people, and he asked them how much they reckoned that intention contributed to their successes, how much action contributed to their successes, and how much state contributed to their success. And what he found was, let me back up a little bit and say, that people who are very into the idea of the law of attraction will probably tell you that intention is the big thing. And people who are, telling you need to be a crush it entrepreneur and you need to go, go, go and take action all the time, they'll tell you that action is all. But what Eric Plattenberg found was that people who are kind of out there doing the unusual, people who aren't middle of the road or aren't conventional successes, so people like Olympic gold medalists, people who are doing extreme sports, people who are innovators, people who are creative successes, they told him that, without a doubt, state was the thing that is the most important. You have to have all the intentions so that you can do all the prep work and you can do all the study or training. You have to take action, because without action, nothing happens. But if you are but your performance relies a huge amount on your state of mind, your mindset. And obviously, I loved that because it's something that I have been talking about here. It's something that I believe. And it's one of the reasons that I talk about these kinds of issues, mindset and getting yourself in the right frame of mind and building systems that make the rest of it all kind of fall away. So, because I have seen that if you can get yourself in the right mindset, if you can tell yourself, I am a writer, if you can get yourself really into that writing headspace before you even sit down to write, that's when your writing goes well. And sometimes it happens, when you're in the middle of a project. It can be easier to get into that space because you can read through what you wrote yesterday and it sort of immediately catapults you back into that space you were in where the writing was going well. I think that's one of the reasons that it can be hard to start a new story. Some people don't find that. They find it really easy to start a new story, and then when it starts to get tricky and complicated, instead of acknowledging that, the middle of a story is just tricky and complicated, it's because you're complicating your characters' lives and it gets complicated, instead of acknowledging that and going, this bit's just hard, we have a tendency to say, I'm no good. And that can stop us in our tracks because state is so important. And then in an example of how these things happen, when we are writers and we're looking for ideas, we start to see things that are connected and then we can connect them and put them together. I also came across a podcast from Seth Godin this week. He talked about what he calls Alexander's theorem of professional exceptionalism. And it was a really interesting one. I think creative people should all go and listen to it for the one particular line in it where he talks about creatives and why we have so much trouble with self-confidence. And he talks about this guy who did some research into people like surgeons and people who've studied for a long time, surgeons and therapists and, people who've, lawyers, people who've studied for a long time, and there's fewer of them than there are of other professions. And having gone through that funnel of, lots of people start out in training, and then eventually when you're in that profession, there's a smaller number of you and you are more sought out and higher paid. You start to believe your own hype. And there is a trend where people in those kinds of positions tend to view themselves as above average. Not just above average, but in the top, 10% of all surgeons, therapists, lawyers. Because they don't hear a lot of negative feedback on what they're doing. If people don't like their therapist, they leave them. And they don't complain, they don't write them a 1-star review, they just leave. So the therapist never hears a critique of what they're doing. Conversely, Seth Godin says, people who are doing creative work like us, we're constantly hearing what we're doing wrong. Constantly. It's how we seek feedback. We don't actually ever want somebody just to say to us, oh, your story was great, I liked it. We want to hear what worked for them, what didn't work for them, all that stuff. And the other part of this equation is that what we do, everyone thinks they can do. Everybody has been taught to write. Everybody has been taught to read, more or less. Everyone thinks they can draw a little bit. You can draw a sketch. So these creative pursuits that we do don't feel as highly valued because they're not as exclusive. Now, doing it well is still an exclusive thing. And I wonder if that's why so many of us feel like we need to be published by someone else because we've been That helps with the exclusivity. You're not just a writer, you're one of those writers, the ones that have been chosen as the best. And we think that if we've been chosen, it's going to be so much easier to be confident and get ourselves into that writing state where writing will be easy. I'm not sure that's the truth. I've interviewed enough successful writers that, I don't believe that's the truth. So nobody else is ever going to fix this problem for us of getting us into the right frame of mind to be successful at our writing. And when I talk about success, you know me by now, if you've been listening to this podcast for any time, I'm not talking about publishing. I'm not talking about prizes. I'm not talking about any of that stuff. I'm talking about success internally. Whatever your definition of success is on a day when you sit down to write, never mind your long-term goals, but on a day when you sit down to write, your goal of success is probably a feeling. You might say, I want to write 2,000 words. You want to write 2,000 words because that will make you feel like you have had a successful writing session. Or you might say, I want to get into that flow state while I'm writing. And that's a feeling. We're always chasing a state. That's what success means to us. It's an emotion. So I'm going to keep banging on about this idea of getting your head in the right place, set your own definition of success, and understand that you're not going to get what you need from outside yourself. And then you can start working on giving yourself what you need. I'm going to suggest that one of the ways, obviously, that I think one of the ways that you can work on this is to join a challenge like Story a Day. Because when you put a time limit on a challenge and you push yourself to go hard for 30 days, 31 days, whatever it is, you get to practice the more extreme version of what it is that you want to do. You get to find out what your limits are, and they're probably different from what you thought they were. I have a friend who trained for a marathon, and she said her trainer told her, it's never about your legs being tired. Your legs muscles can always go further than you think they can. They just can. They can keep moving even when you think they can't. That's not what the struggle is. The struggle is believing that you can keep going. So a challenge like Story a Day gives you the opportunity to challenge yourself. Can I really write a story a day? Yes, you can. Can you write 31 good stories? No. But you can write 30 stories and, 10 of them will have potential. You will find how to cram writing into your day, and that will make you feel successful because writing is what you want to do. So some ideas, if you're thinking about joining us for Story a Day September, I have some ideas for you for how to put yourself into that positive state that will help you jump into your writing every day without having to work up to it. As the month goes on, it gets much easier. I can tell you this, but you have to prove it to yourself. As the month goes on, it gets easier to get to your writing every day. It doesn't get easier to write the stories, but it gets easier to turn up because you're learning, you're teaching yourself how to get into a writing state day after day after day. So some of the things that people do that I know that work, it can be really helpful to plan what you're going to write about tomorrow, the night before, or to plan when you're going to write, where you're going to write, visualize it. And so that when tomorrow comes, you just get up and you go and you do the thing. You write about, or you have an idea, a story spark that you're going to write about, or at least that you're going to start with, or, you're going to write at this time and in that place. So before you go to sleep at night, spend some time thinking, I want to write a story tomorrow. What does that look like? How can I make that successful? And sort of picture yourself doing it. That helps you to get in quickly into the right state, the right frame of mind when you get to that point tomorrow. Build in enough time into your day to write. One of the most, what's the word? I'm not sure. That's great for a writer, isn't it? I'm running out of words. One of the things that stalls me, and I heard John Cleese talk about this too, so it's not just me, is not giving yourself enough time for creativity. He suggests giving yourself a 90-minute window to try and do anything, because as he says, the first 30 minutes will be your brain saying things like, oh, you have to remember to pick up milk, and what about that bill you haven't paid? So yeah, there's some of that. I don't know that 90 minutes is the right amount of time for you. I suspect whatever time you're giving yourself, if you're writing, it's the right amount. If you're not writing, you're either giving yourself too little or too much time. I like to feel a little expansive when I sit down to write. A lot of the time, if I feel like I've got to get it all done, I've got to come up with the idea, I've got to write the story, I've got to cram it all into this little half-hour window, that can be paralysing. And I will say, conversely, there are days when I'm like, well, I've got 20 minutes and I need to write a story and I'm just going to write something in 20 minutes. And sometimes that works. But if you are feeling cramped and panicky about your ability to get your story written, maybe you need to build some time into your day that gives you time to commute from your daily life into your writing. And that commute might look like finding a room where the door that you can close and just like be by yourself. It might be doing some meditation or qigong or yoga or something, just like to step from your daily life into your writing life. But building in that time to just like take a breath between what you were doing before and what you're going to be doing, and telling yourself it's okay. You've got this. You're going to be okay. It really helps. It gets you, and it helps. I used to feel silly saying that, but now I've got all these like behavioral scientists and people doing the research for me to point out that this mindset stuff is most of the battle. So build time into your day. If you can start early in the day, it gives you a kick that sort of propels you into your day. I'm doing some open writing sprints in the last week of August. If you're listening to this live, make sure that you're on the Story a Day mailing list. Come over to storyaday.org and I will send out an invitation to you to come and hang out with us first thing in the morning. We do it 8:30 on Eastern time, Eastern US. And we hang out together in a Zoom room, me and the Story a Day superstars, and we just write together. It's a little co-working session. We say hi, we chat for a few minutes, and then we start a timer. We write for 25 minutes. We break in the middle and stretch and talk and get back to writing. And then we wrap it up. And that's the start of our day. And for some people, depending on your time zone, that's the middle of their day. And for some people, it's a little later in the day. But I would invite you in the preparation, as part of your preparations for Story a Day September, I'm opening up those sessions to anyone in the Story a Day community who wants to join us for a little co-working writing session to get your day started. So storyaday.org, get on the mailing list, I'll send you details about that. If you can be with other people who are doing the same thing, who are getting their work done, it's kind of amazing how effective that is. The first time I ever did this sort of co-working with somebody just with a camera running, we were in two different states, and I mean states geographically, not headspace. We were in two different states and we were working on a project together, and we just worked with our cameras on. And so anytime we had a question, we could pop up and go, oh, that on page 4, what's the. But that's not what we do in these co-working writing sessions at Story a Day. But I started them because in that first time I did that, I discovered I was so much more focused, more less distractible, and more productive because I had somebody else there with me. So I started doing these I started doing these writing sessions with the Story a Day superstars years ago. But when the pandemic happened, I opened them up to everybody, and we did them every day in April, I think, or March. Started doing them in March, and it really quickly became a part of my day and part of the day for the people who show up. There are people who've been showing up every day since March, not having missed many days at all. And we just start our day writing together. So if you'd like to be part of that, like I say, get on the mailing list and I'll send you information about that. So to wrap things up today, I want to invite you to consider joining us for Story A Day September. If you're looking for something more and some people to hold you accountable, there's the online community at Story A Day, which is quite active during the challenges. But I will be opening up my Superstars group again next week. And it's an amazing group of people who get together to support each other, to encourage each other. We do writing sprints. We delve into writing craft stuff. I do some workshops. We have some guests. It's an amazing thing to have this container and these other people that you get to know and get to trust and can just hang out with as a writer. You may live somewhere where there aren't many writers near you. We're all kind of living like that at the moment because we're not allowed out of our houses. But to be able to hang out with people online, I think we've all discovered this year that it works. You know, if you can't be with people physically, being with them virtually is not a terrible substitute. So what we've been doing with the Superstars for a couple of years now is definitely something that I think a lot of people will be more comfortable with. So I will be opening that up next week. Watch for details. We'd love to have you with us. The more people that we have in our group, the more diverse voices we have, the more perspectives we have, the more life experience we have, the richer the group is. So watch for details about that as well. But in the meantime, think about what you can do to keep yourself in the optimal state for writing anytime you're at your desk, anytime you pick up whatever it is that you use to write. Don't worry about grammar. Don't worry about rising action or pacing or whether your dialogue sounds realistic. Start with, I am a writer and I'm excited to be here. And this is going to be a great writing session. Or whatever feels, I was going to say whatever feels authentic to you, but it's not going to feel authentic to you. It's going to feel weird the first few times you do it. But trying to get yourself into the right mindset, the right headspace is super important. It's worth it. And I'd love to hear from you what you do to get yourself into the right writing space. So leave a comment, come over to the blog, leave a comment on this post, or email me, julie@storyaday.org, with any questions. And that's what I have for you this week. Story A Day September is just around the corner. I hope you'll join us. Most of all, keep writing. Thanks for listening. Why not come over to the blog at storyaday.org and check out this week's writing prompts and articles. And in the meantime, have a great creative week and of course, keep writing.